what makes Jesus different to other great religious leaders? Now, Jesus stands apart from other prominent religious leaders. And there's often this popular assumption that goes on to the fact that, there are several paths that lead to the same destination. Or maybe that if God is at the mountaintop, then there are many paths up the mountain. But the founders of these various religions are actually very different. There are, of course, the similarities from the founders and leaders of all major world religions, such as Muhammad from Islam and Buddha from Buddhism, or Joseph Smith of Mormonism, and other historical religious figures all claimed, like Jesus, that they spoke prophetically and offer insights into the human condition. Yet, as Christians, we believe that Jesus actually stands apart from these prominent religions and leaders. He's unique in several ways, from his life, his teaching, and his death and resurrection. So, what actually makes Jesus different from all these different religious leaders? Point number one, he lived a different life. The Bible claims that Jesus is the only man ever to have lived a perfect, sinless life. So whether or not you believe that the Bible is true, it can't be denied that the writings composed about them, or no other religious leader whose writings have been composed about them, makes such a statement or credited with such a life. So let's take a moment to consider these different religious leaders from the major religions in the world. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, well, he reportedly killed many people who disagreed with him. Krishna, of the Hindu faith, very likely or allegedly murdered his uncle. Then there's Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, abandoned his wife and son to achieve enlightenment. Jesus is universally accepted as a good man with no moral blemish on his record, even to those who reject the idea that he could be the Son of God, except that he went about doing good. He is the only one who can profess perfection. Even his followers backed him up with their claim through their testimonies. Peter said of Jesus, he committed no sin. John likewise stated in Jesus, in him, was no sin. Jesus' ability not only to promote faultless actions, but also to live in perfection, sets his life apart from that of all other people. The different message. Point number two. Jesus' teaching was definitely unique. While other religious leaders pointed towards some other person or entity for inspiration, Jesus pointed to himself and claimed to be God in bodily form. Muhammad confessed that he was only a man, directed people to Allah. Buddha never claimed to the ability to save people, but rather pointed people to a noble path. But Jesus declared, I am the way, the truth, and the life. See, he did not profess to show people merely the way to salvation, but asserted that he himself is salvation. Others pointed to the truth. Jesus said, I am the truth. Jesus has many other unique claims. He claimed not to be of this world, but from heaven. He claimed that he had a conscious existence before Abraham, the man who lived 1,800 years before his birth. Before Jesus' birth, he claimed to be one with God, which in that time was recognized as a claim of divinity amongst the Jews. No other significant religious leader to date has made such bold, and some would say, slightly crazy statements about themselves. Point number three. He had life after his death. And then, it's almost an odd thing to bring up, but it's this major distinguisher between Jesus and other world religious leaders. Because it's his resurrection. Both Buddha and Muhammad got sick and died. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, he was shot and killed while in prison. Every other religious leader in history has died and, frankly, has remained dead. No one claims otherwise about those leaders. No one, not even their most fervent followers, have said, actually, no. All of them say, yes, they're dead, they're gone. But when it comes to Jesus, the message is different. The followers of Jesus throughout the centuries have claimed that after his crucifixion, Jesus didn't remain in the grave, but appeared alive again, giving numerous proofs that he indeed has risen from the dead. Philosopher and theologian William Lane Craig of the Talbot School of Theology offers 4 lines of evidence that point to the truth of the resurrection story. Firstly, Jesus' burial. There were multiple people that were part of Joseph Arimathea who went and took Jesus' body and put him in the tomb. There were people that didn't disagree. They followed the burial rituals, which meant the man was definitely dead. There wasn't any, he could be, maybe fallen asleep, had fainted, so we got to take him to a hospital. No, he was dead. They followed it through. They knew. They buried a dead man. Then there's the empty tomb. Point number 2. The soldiers had moved the stone in front of the tomb. They knew there was a dead man in there. And when they got there in the morning, it was gone. There was an empty tomb. No one disagrees with them that they knew. There was evidence. There was proof. People had testimonies. There was an empty tomb. Then there's the fact that multiple people, often in groups, claimed that Jesus appeared to them. And this is a fascinating thing to actually work through, because there were multiple people that gave the testimony, gave the story, told people, no, Jesus appeared to us. We were in a room. And no one's ever argued with them and said, actually, no, they may have been drinking a bit too much. No, they agreed. No, this is true. And the final point, the origin of the followers' belief in the resurrection. The story of Jesus' belief and the fact that all his followers believe that Jesus has been resurrected has been consistent and the same for the last 2,000 years. The story has not changed. It has not been tweaked. It hasn't been added to. It's the very same story that is carried through for the last 2,000 years. Though other theories could help explain each one of these facts individually, Craig argues that the best, indeed the only explanation for all 4 is that God did, in fact, raise Jesus from the dead. See, the resurrection is the central piece of evidence upon which Christianity stands. That is, if it is true that Jesus defeated death to live an eternal life, then it follows that everything else that Jesus said about himself must also be true. Point number 4. Jesus is different from other religious leaders because when you engage with him, you either think he's crazy or you have to admit he's actually very different. Sholem Asch, who's a early 20th century Jewish historical writer and playwright, quite a controversial one at that, actually, who actually in a weird way, he was an Orthodox Jew, but he promoted Christianity often. And this is one of the really beautiful things that he said. He said, Jesus Christ to me is the outstanding personality of all time and all history. Everything he ever said or did has value for us today. And there is something that you can say for no other man, dead or alive. There is no easy middle ground to stroll upon. You either accept Jesus or you reject him. Those of us who investigate his life, his message, death, and resurrection agree that ultimately Jesus is different from other religious leaders. From his outrageous claims and supposed life after death, limit our ability to place him in that simple, good moral teacher category of most religious leaders. See, the claims that Jesus made and the claims that others have made about him should generate a desire in us to investigate more thoroughly just who this person is. Because he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And if it's not true, the reality is that it doesn't matter. But if it is true, then it really matters more than anything else.